Now it's time to take a trip down the rumor mill. This article from comicbookresources.com. Rumor, Marvel boss Kevin Feige wants more experienced filmmakers for the MCU. A new rumor suggests that Marvel Studios CEO Kevin Feige is looking to seek out seasoned creatives to helm upcoming MCU projects. The Marvel Studios president Kevin Feige could change his hiring process, as a rumor suggests he is looking for more experienced filmmakers to direct Marvel Cinematic Universe projects. On an episode of the Hot Mic podcast, insider Jeff Snyder claimed that Feige is looking to adjust his hiring strategy and bring in already established filmmakers and creatives to helm the MCU's projects. Snyder noted, quote, Feige does want to hire more established talent behind the camera. This rumor has not been officially confirmed by Marvel or Disney. Snyder's comments echo previous reports made in June 2022 by insider and Deadline reporter Justin Kroll that claimed Feige and Marvel Studios were eyeing big-name directors for Fantastic Four. This decision was reportedly influenced by the success of director Sam Raimi after Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. Quote, while no names have surfaced, multiple sources say it's a large mix of candidates. Feige and company are taking a lot of shots at some big names, Kroll wrote at the time. One source close to the process said, Kevin doesn't want to oversee the entire shoot, and after not having to worry about that with Raimi, he is very game for the same outcome with this shoot, end quote. At the time, Marvel Studios was looking to replace John Watts as the director of Fantastic Four, a role that would later be filled by WandaVision's Matt Shakman. I do not know how to pronounce it. I've never heard the name pronounced. And here's the thing that the article brings up here is that Phase 1 of the MCU began with established filmmakers. Phase 1 of the MCU saw films helmed by directors such as Jon Favreau, Kenneth Branagh, Joe Johnston, and Joss Whedon. You're also forgetting about Louis Leterrier, who did the Incredible Hulk for Universal. But to be fair to the author of this article, that's Andre Joseph. The Incredible Hulk originally started as a sequel to 2003's Hulk, the one that Ang Lee had made, and it was retroactively in addition to the MCU. But anyway, getting back to this. Marvel Studios branched out to creatives lifted from television and the independent film scene, like Joe and Anthony Russo, who were hired for Captain America the Winter Soldier based on their work for NBC's Community, which Community, one of the best sitcoms ever made in my opinion. The Russo brothers went on to direct Captain America Civil War, Avengers Infinity War, and 2019's Avengers Endgame. Feige then hired talents like Watts to direct the Spider-Man Homecoming trilogy, and destined Daniel Cretton for Shang-Chi, The Legend of the Ten Rings. However, moving on to Phase 4, several films were met with a lukewarm reception from fans and critics. For example, 2021's Eternals, directed by Oscar winner Chloe Zhao, became Marvel's first quote-unquote rotten film on the review aggregate site Rotten Tomatoes. Additionally, Marvel's recent theatrical release, Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, was the lowest grossing entry in Marvel's Ant-Man film franchise, and ironically, it was also the biggest opening weekend for any Ant-Man movie. Right, so it was the biggest opening weekend, but it was the lowest grossing entry both at the same time. Mahershala Ali's Blade reboot also saw a major change when original director Basim Tariq was replaced by Lovecraft Country director Jan Demange. As of December 2022, additional reports suggest that Marvel would be quote-unquote re-examining its Phase 5 and 6 slates after internal negative feedback over the quality and distribution of Phase 4. I don't think it was just internal feedback that caused them to reconsider Phase 5 and 6, because holy fuck, look at the amount of money that they've been losing. And it wasn't just COVID that created the problem. The issues noted in the report include creative difficulties with scripts and less than impressive visual effects. As a result, Marvel Studios is reportedly focusing on quality over quantity moving forward. I'm going to have to see it to believe it. This report has not been officially confirmed by Marvel or Disney. But here's the biggest problem with this rumor, if this were to be true, and I put this in the thumbnail. The directors are not the fucking problem with Marvel movies. Right? The problem with Marvel movies is the process and how they're being created. Let's go back to Phase 1. Right? Now, Iron Man and Iron Man 2 felt similar, but to be fair, those movies were sequels to each other, right? Iron Man 2 obviously being a sequel, Iron Man 1, both headed up by Jon Favreau. Kenneth Branagh's Thor felt like a Kenneth Branagh movie. Joe Johnston did Captain America: The First Avenger. Again, was significantly different, from Iron Man, Thor, the Incredible Hulk up to that point, and even Joss Whedon's first Avengers movie felt completely different from John Favreau's Iron Man, Kenneth Branagh's Thor, Joe Johnston's Captain America, Louis Leterrier's The Incredible Hulk. You get my point. They all, even though all of the movies were connected, they all felt different enough in a way that you didn't have to watch all of the movies in order to understand. You could watch the Avengers cold turkey, not watch Iron Man, Incredible Hulk, Iron Man 2, Thor, Captain America, First Avenger. You don't need to watch any of those movies to watch the Avengers. You can watch the Avengers cold as is. The problem with Marvel movies is that because they are now so interconnected after the Avengers, you have to watch every single movie in order to understand what in the fuck is going on. The only exception to that rule was the two Guardians of the Galaxy movies being its own separate thing, but still. You have to watch every single Marvel movie in order to understand what the hell is going on, which means the process of making a Marvel movie had to change from being more director-driven to producer-driven. So once again, it's not the directors that are the problem. And it's a good idea to hire these lesser-known directors to take on projects of this caliber, because you don't want to have a director that is more famous than the movie itself, right? You don't want to have Ridley Scott come in and do an Avengers movie or even an Ant-Man movie. Otherwise, you're gonna run into the exact same problems that the James Bond franchise ran into when they brought in Sam Mendes to do two of the James Bond movies, because Sam Mendes was such a well-known director. Skyfall and Spectre were basically Sam Mendes' take on James Bond, which was absolutely horrible and felt completely disjointed from the rest of the James Bond movies. But because it was Sam Mendes, and Sam Mendes was more famous than James Bond himself, he could get away with it because they wanted to sell Skyfall and Spectre on the fact that they got a filmmaker like Sam Mendes to come in and agree to do the movies. There's a massive trade-off with that. And if this report is to be true, this actually came out, I think, right after Victoria Alonso got fired, and that is, Marvel directors don't really direct the movies. I'm just gonna read the meat and potatoes of this article from Screen Rant. According to Hollywood reporter Chris Lee on the podcast The Town with Matthew Bellini, the longtime Marvel executive Victoria Alonso, who was recently fired by the studio, once told a Marvel filmmaker that another director who had helmed one of the quote-unquote biggest movies Marvel ever put out did not really deserve the credit for the movie. According to Lee, Alonso said about that director, well, let's actually go into what was actually said here. Quote, around the time of Victoria Alonso's dismissal, I was DMing with an extremely well-known director who had worked on a Marvel film, and she was relating some remarks that Victoria had said to her about another filmmaker who directed, let's just say, it was one of the biggest movies Marvel ever put out. And Alonso was talking about this guy, and Alonso said, they don't direct the movies, we direct the movies. Meaning that the filmmakers don't have creative control over the look of the films that Marvel does. So once again, I want to reiterate, the directors are not the problem with Marvel movies. The biggest problem with Marvel movies is the process of making, is this filmmaking by committee approach that they've taken, because Marvel wanted to be more of a producer-driven franchise instead of a director franchise, despite the fact that it was a director franchise to begin with. As I said, Jon Favreau, Kenneth Branagh, Louis Leterrier, Joe Johnston, and Joss Whedon, and we'll even throw James Gunn in there. They all came and did their own thing. All the movies were loosely connected, but you didn't have to watch each and every single movie in order to understand it. But the minute it became producer-driven and everything had to be interconnected, that's when everything fell apart, and that is what alienated some of these more experienced filmmakers from wanting to jump in to direct an MCU movie. Because remember, boys and girls, Edgar Wright was effectively fired from Ant-Man despite working on that movie for well over a decade, and he's come out later and admitted why he left Ant-Man, but in my opinion, it's probably because he didn't want to deal with the process of actually making a Marvel movie. So once again, the directors are not the problem, the process is the problem.